afternoon, Xavier. Thank you very much for joining us on E-Manufacturing Conversations.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure on mine. So the first question we like to ask our guests is always, how did you get here and what do you make? What's your answer?
I studied mechatronic engineering and computer science at the University of Western Australia, and resulting from a thesis I did there, I started a company which is called Advanced Navigation, and we do neural network-based navigation systems and robotics systems. So we service a range of industries across land, sea, air, space and marine, and a whole different range of products servicing those industries.
Let's say sort of skimming over the surface of what you do. Tell me, if you'd like to go back to the beginning, a little more about the sort of big idea that you got started on and how you decided to take it in the direction you did, because you might have just made it into a bit of software that you sold as a service or whatever. You didn't need to be making end products. Tell me about taking that one kernel of a good idea and turning it into this.
Sure. So yeah, when I started at university in 2004, I guess I was with all my friends from high school. We were going through and choosing which course strain of engineering we wanted to do. In that process, I met a really interesting guy in the engineering faculty who was working on artificial brains in a computer. And that's what we now know as neural networks, or the prominent form of AI. And so I found that whole concept really interesting, and the capacity to do some really powerful things with that really profound. So I went into that stream of engineering. He was running the mechatronic engineering faculty. And I spent the next, I think it was 7 years total, working on that kind of technology, so neural networks, as well as the whole rest of the mechatronics and computer science space. It took me to a thesis in 2009, which was a neural network alternative to the Kalman filter. Now, the Kalman filter is this algorithm that's used everywhere. You find it in your car, your home, in business, everywhere. So it's really where there's sensors, you'll find the Kalman filter. And what its main thing it accomplishes is it removes errors from sensors. So it allows you to have a sensor that has some error, and all sensors have errors, and then take that away. And as a result, you can get a much more accurate reading from the sensor. In the case of my thesis, it was related to navigation. So a strain of navigation called inertial navigation, where you use accelerometers and gyroscopes to navigate and find where you are from a starting position. And so that had really promising results. We saw about a 10 times performance improvement over the current Kalman filter technology. It still had a few glitches in 2010, so spent the next couple of years working on it, and 2012, everything was performing perfectly and it was ready for commercialization. So that's where I got together with my business partner, Chris, who's very specialized in sensors, the actual sensor hardware design, microelectronics and things like that. And we combined together to form Advanced Navigation to sell both that neural network algorithm technology combined with advanced hardware products.
Right, and how did you meet Chris?
So Chris and I had gone to university together. We'd met about 5 years earlier and knew each other through the engineering department. Also, we were quite close friends and we'd lived together. We'd been in the same share house and everything like that. So we had quite a close working relationship, but also developed some technology with him. So we had a good engineering relationship as well, where we knew we worked really well together. It's kind of like a really good relationship to sort of found and start developing products together.
Yeah, sure. You don't always want to go into business with your friends because you could do badly in the business and the friendship would, turn into something nasty as a result. But I guess it's worked out for you guys.
Well, absolutely. I think, you need to trust the people that you're getting into deeply with business. I guess if you don't have a previous relationship, it can be hard to develop that trust initially, and then it can actually affect the business. So I think having that sort of 5 years of prior relationship and sort of living together is pretty critically important to be able to trust them, trust the person that you've sort of found in the business with, to just sort of give them the autonomy they need to exercise themselves effectively in the business. And I think that's really critical to how we work together as co-CEOs in the business. So basically, as co-CEOs, we don't both cover the same things. We cover separate areas to make sure we're getting bang for buck with co-CEOs. I guess the benefit of having co-CEOs is you can cover double the territory. But to do that, each co-CEO needs to trust that the other co-CEO has it 100%. And so it takes deep trust for a co-CEO relationship to work effectively.
And so what's your patch and his patch, essentially?
So my patch is primarily the algorithms, software, IT support, comms marketing, and his patch would be hardware, procurement, manufacturing, and sort of sales and finance. So he was a double degree engineering commerce. And so, yeah, he's really focused on that side of the business.
So you got started in 2012, I think you said. What was, your first product and your first customer?
So the first product was Spatial. So Spatial was what we launched, which was the first neural network-based inertial navigation system. And at the time, very market leading, right? So when we actually published the specs and started publishing the papers on it, people just didn't believe it. They thought that we were making it up. We found it, we thought this thing is so revolutionary, it's going to sell very quickly. But actually then we found a bigger problem in getting people to actually trust that. And so yes, that's right. People just think, oh, well, it's made up. And so what we found was the best way to actually get those sales happening was to go to trade shows and get demo units in people's hands so they could actually see that performance for themselves. And so we would do free loan units, free demo units, and we'd go and demonstrate them at people's factories. And I think that was really key to picking up the business quickly.
And your sort of commercial breakthrough, if you could remember it, what was it?
Yeah, so one of the first key customers was Bombardier. So they do trains and planes in Canada out of Montreal. And so, yeah, I was living in Montreal at the time, working that deal, as well as a few US deals. And we had a breakthrough with them on the trains that they were developing. That was really a big stepping stone that allowed us to sort of really push forward from there.
That was about not long after you got started, like 2012, 2013?
So I think we've been going for about 7 months until we had our first big break, and then they dropped from there. So other companies we've been working with or trying to work with, like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, a few of the US companies, they sort of fell into our laps after that.
And so a similar question, as a first major customer, who was your first major investor?
Yeah, sure. So we bootstrapped it from the start. So me and Chris had both saved up as much money as we could. I think we each had $70,000 each. And then we took out as many loans and credit cards as we could with the banks. And that was really how we funded the business and to get to a point of profitability. Fortunately, within the first year, we became profitable and we're able to sustain for the next 5 years and grow organically through that 5 years. And it really occurred to us what we really need to do if we want to move faster and grow faster. We really need to have some capital invested. So we had been reached out to by investors a number of times, but one of the ones that really struck our interest was our innovation fund. And so they became the first investor in the group in 2017.
You mentioned one of your mentors, the head of school, I think you said at UWA. What was his name, just out of curiosity? I didn't catch that earlier.
So his name is Adrian Keating.
Okay. Commercially speaking, who are your mentors? Who are some of the people that said, look, this guy's got a good idea, but he's a bit green, hasn't run a business before, let's help him out?
So I guess we probably took a little bit of an unusual path in that we didn't necessarily have mentors as we went through. I'd had a few businesses prior. So I had a computer business and then a DJ business and a few things throughout university. So I'd had a few failures and a couple of wins, and so it kind of taught me a lot through that period. But we didn't really have mentors until OAF came on board, and then OAF would have become really the first mentors there through the board interactions where they kind of guided us and sort of pushed us to, I guess, improve our reporting and a few things like that. The financial reporting, the sales reporting, all of those kinds of things.
Not all promising hardware companies here are able to raise capital so successfully as you've been able to. What do you think you've done that's made you reasonably good at it, it looks like, based on the size of your last funding rounds?
So I think one of the key things for us is probably our technology moat. And, you hear this moat terminology in the investment space. And what it really means is, a moat was obviously the water around a castle back in the olden days that would stop people getting through. It's a similar thing today that stops people being able to replicate a company easily.
Being able to say defensible, this is defensible technology, etc.
So having some very unique IP, intellectual property, has been key to that. So still we're the only company to have neural network-based navigation systems on the market. So I think that moat is a key part of our journey.
Saw you guys a few weeks ago at the opening of your Tech Lab facility, and we're speaking here at a different office. How many little parts of your empire are they, and where are they spread, and who does what at each?
Sure. Here in Sydney, we are now down to 2 facilities. So we have the headquarters, which are in right now, and Tech Labs is now our sole manufacturing facility in New South Wales. And then we have our Canberra photonics research facility. We have our Newcastle radio research facility, our Brisbane UAV research facility, and our Perth underwater research and manufacturing facility.
I think the AFR article, when you opened the new facility, it mentioned that it had capacity for $3 billion worth of products, and that you're a company that may or may not be worth $1 billion. Can you say if those figures are accurate?
So look, the $3 billion is accurate. So that is the current manufacturing capacity. In fact, as we expand within the building, that will increase as well, beyond the 3 to higher numbers than that. In terms of evaluation, we have publicly listed investors, which prohibits us talking about things like this publicly.
I thought that might be your answer, but the girl has to ask.
Yeah.
Tell me about the usefulness of being co-located with Space Machines Company, and the other tenants at Tech Lab.
Tech Labs is really what they wanted to do there is take companies that are doing high-tech manufacturing and put them all in the same space. And some of the very expensive things that you need to do in some of those high-tech manufacturing industries, you can share the cost of those. Mm-hmm. One of the examples where we share the cost of things is both Space Machines and Advanced Navigation need clean room facilities. And these are, you have various levels of clean room. A hospital itself has a clean room level where they filter the air and all of that. And you kind of get grades higher and higher and higher. And the grade that we require and the grade that also Space Machines require is quite a few levels higher than the hospital grade. And actually, when you come to running the numbers on what those facilities cost to have that, it's actually a very high number to build that. So being able to share that within multiple companies who require things like clean room facilities and other advanced manufacturing facility requirements means that we can bring down the cost for everyone and really push forward high-tech manufacturing in Australia.
And the release from the day mentioned that you have 3 ongoing projects that will be assisted by being located there and near companies and academics who would be able to share the R&D burden with you guys. Would you like to say anything about the usefulness of that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the really exciting projects that we're working on right now is a technology that's getting put into the Sydney's underground train stations. And that's to help visually impaired users navigate to get onto the train, so through the underground train station and onto the train. So for people who aren't aware, GPS doesn't work underground. You need to use different technologies, and in this case we're using a technology called ultra-wideband. And then that technology can pinpoint users' smartphones to within a centimetre and then give them voice directions on which way they need to turn, how many metres forward, how many footsteps forward they need to go, and really guide those visually impaired users very accurately through a train station, which can be a bit of a hazardous area for those disabilities. So that's one of the really exciting things. One of the other ones is our cloud ground control technology, which is a drone fleet control platform where we're doing live 3D mapping. So you can basically fly over a site and generate a 3D map in real time, and then the drone can fly over again, or the series of drones, and rebuild the map in real time. So really a huge deal for surveying industries. And then the third technology relates to our lidav photonics technology, which is, people may know lidar, And so this is similar to LiDAR, but has velocity and a number of other parameters as well. So it can detect the density of surfaces and material properties using laser. And it allows you to have a very good situational awareness. So I guess when you're in the robotic space and autonomy, situational awareness is everything. And so this really pumps up your situational awareness with all this extra data that the lidav system can provide you relative to a LiDAR system.
Right, and you are taking that to some exciting places, namely the moon. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the lidav technology and our defog technology is on the next mission to the moon with Intuitive Machines and NASA. It's used for the lander, and basically the INS, so the defog inertial navigation technology, allows it to position, and then the lidav technology allows it to look at the ground and identify an appropriate landing site, all fully autonomously, check the structure of the ground that it's going to be landing on, and verify that it's going to hold the weight of the lander's feet through the density and everything like that of the materials. Come down and very precisely through the velocimetry land precisely. So it really takes all the risk out of automatic landing, which is historically a very risky procedure.
What are some of the challenges when you're developing lidav for that application?
So I guess the two primary challenges in space are radiation and vacuum. And I would definitely say of the two, radiation is a lot harder. Typically, when you're faced with radiation, the easiest way to overcome it is lead shielding. And that's just not an option because, when you're going up in space, every gram counts. Every gram costs a lot of money to send up. So you have to find really interesting ways to overcome radiation requirements. And those can be both hardware and software methods. I mean, it's quite a deep field to go into, but yeah, it is very challenging dealing with the radiation requirements. The vacuum as well, it requires careful design consideration.
You mentioned defogs earlier, and you said at the launch the other day that you were one of only 4 companies in the world making strategic grade defogs. Could you please tell me about the significance of that and the rarity of the type of product that you're making?
Yeah, there's only 4 companies in the world that can produce strategic grade fibre optic gyroscopes, and they are produced en masse, so they're used very widely. There's millions of them out there. However, really all of those millions come out of only a handful of facilities around the world. So you've got Germany, France and the USA, really the primary countries that are producing that technology, and now Australia. So it gives Australia a really important capability and a strategic capability of being able to produce that when you need to use that technology for things like navigation of marine vessels, spacecraft, all sorts of survey activities. So, they're a very widely used technology across many industries, and having that capability in-house or in the country is really a big benefit for Australia.
And are they using the old stuff, the Kalman filter, for their product, or are they moved on to something?
Yeah, all the competitors are still using the Kalman filter.
Right, still stuck in the 60s. I'd like to know about supply chain / manufacturing stuff. You're making very complex goods with a lot of complex inputs, very exacting standards for fibre optics and whatever else you're bringing in and transforming. Tell me about some of what goes on and where material's coming from.
I guess we have a whole procurement team that manages that. It is a complex task, and for every supplier you have, you need to have a backup supplier to make sure you can still continue to deliver if a primary supplier goes down. And sometimes you'll even just alternate the suppliers to make sure you're testing the backup supplier. So there's a lot of work qualifying suppliers and maintaining supplier relationships and making sure that we have that ability to deliver to our customers what we need to deliver.
And is the very small population of electronics manufacturers in Australia something of a difficulty for what you do?
Look, it is a small community, but it means you have a bigger power in the community, I guess. So if you're buying a larger volume in a smaller pool, you have more sway. So it can actually have advantages. However, a lot of our equipment still does have to come from the United States or Europe, just due to there not being any facilities here.
MEMS, for example, there's no one in Australia that makes those.
No, that's right.
The pretty considerable amount of revenues you're spending on R&D, 20%. Tell me about your R&D ambitions, what it looks like, and if there might be any sort of customer or product case studies that are worth mentioning as sort of a way to highlight that?
Look, it all kind of probably ties back to advanced navigation's mission statement, which is to be the catalyst of the autonomy revolution. So we're working with a lot of technologies that are powering that autonomy revolution. So our technology is smaller, lighter, lower power, higher performing, higher reliability, and that really enables a lot of platforms. So for example, on the space application that we talked about earlier, Intuitive Machines has come up with this hopper concept, and it's basically, rather than using a rover to get around on the moon's surface, which is a wheeled little vehicle, they've come up with this concept of the hopper, which basically just does these little hops. It takes off an autonomous takeoff and an autonomous landing. And in the past, that would have been unthinkable because autonomous landings are quite high risk. But because of the lidav technology, they're now very reliable, and that's really enabled this platform, the hopper. It's a similar case with things like the Airbus Zephyr, which is a low-altitude pseudo-satellite. So it's basically a fixed-wing aircraft powered by solar that can stay up in the sky for 5 years at a time. And it works like a really high-performing satellite. So satellites are in space, so they have to go through the ionosphere and troposphere, which degrades the signals along the way. If you're actually within the Earth's orbit below the troposphere and ionosphere, you can beam signals down without the losses of that, and it really gives you some significant advantages. And the Airbus Zephyr is a platform that's designed to tackle that. So that is also known as the Internet over Africa program, and that was its initial foundation. The idea was to be able to provide internet over all regions of Africa, and it's kind of grown from there to really have a lot more application than that.
Right. So you sell some sort of, for want of a better term, off-the-shelf products, but there's a lot of stuff that's sort of done to answer a customer problem, like that, for example.
Typically, it's all off-the-shelf products. So our off-the-shelf products can be used to enable platforms.
Right.
Yeah.
Another feature of your company's history has been your work in collaboration with universities, notably ANU and RMIT. Not every company is able to work successfully with universities. How come you guys have seemingly been able to nail it? What can, I guess, people learn from what you guys are doing, and something on that, please?
Yeah, so I think from my experience, where things fall over with the university is where it comes to IP arrangements. Mm-hmm. And I think both ANU and RMIT have been very forward-thinking in that regard and really embraced a model of, rather than the university trying to hold the IP and then license it, which always causes some concern for companies, instead they let the IP go out, spin it out as a company, and then they have shares in the company. And so ANU then holds shares, or the university holds shares in whatever resulting companies that are owning that IP. And it's a much better model for IP ownership. And it's really allowed us to move really quickly with like ANU and RMIT on working these technologies. And so some really incredible technologies being developed at Australian academic institutions. And we've really been able to embrace those ones that are really forward-thinking on their IP strategies.
Obviously, for the last few years, unemployment has been pretty low, and skilled people, such as engineers of various disciplines, have been pretty hard to come by based on most of the people I talk to who run companies. Tell me about how the skills issue has affected you guys and how you deal with the, shortage of talent.
Yeah, so I think we see some shortages in areas, but I think the difference, our employees are really excited about the technology that we're developing and the impacts that it has. And so that ability to excite people really means we haven't probably had as much difficulty in the hiring space as some other companies have had. So I guess really it's about taking your employees on the journey with you as well, making sure they're a big part of the company. At Advanced Navigation, we look on our people as one of the biggest parts of the business, right? It's one of the most critical factors of the business. So really bringing those people on the journey with you and, exciting them in what they're developing, I think has been critical to our success in hiring.
What's your workforce look like? I imagine it's pretty scientific and engineering and technician heavy. Do you sort of have any idea of what percentage are of a PhD level or of a degree level or whatever?
I think we did a check, so I think it was something like 93% had a bachelor's degree or higher. I don't know the number of PhDs, but yeah, it is a high proportion. There's a lot of research and development happening. It's a big part of the business. Yeah, so it's a high proportion of engineers and skilled trades and things like that of the business.
And the last question I like to ask guests, yourself included, is there an issue within manufacturing that isn't getting the attention it deserves at the moment from politicians, the media, the public? What's your opinion here?
Look, we've probably heard over the last 10 or so years that the stuff we hear in the media is Australia's losing manufacturing capabilities. And then really in the last, less than 5 years, there's been a real drive to try and recover some of the manufacturing capabilities, and in particular high-tech manufacturing. So I think it is critical that Australia has a number of sovereign manufacturing capabilities, especially with the geopolitical instability that we're seeing at the moment. Being able to be somewhat self-sufficient is really critical for Australia. So I think some of the manufacturing capabilities we may have lost, it's really good to sort of bring those back through a high-tech manufacturing approach where we can keep the costs down. And I think it's really exciting to see that happening at the moment. So, there's a whole heap of high-tech manufacturing ventures that have been opening, and it's really good to see that happening in Australia.
I believe that's everything I wanted to ask you, Xavier. So thank you very much for being on AU Manufacturing Conversations.
Thanks a lot.